2025. It's year 4, day 295 since the full-scale invasion began. A warm welcome, I greet you. For the daily situation report, today's report notes increased Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian energy and military infrastructure, increasing pressure on new front sections in the Kostiantynivka area, a historic combat mission by underwater kamikaze drones against Russian naval vessels, as well as intensive diplomatic efforts in Berlin, while new deliveries for Ukraine are under discussion. First, a quick update on the donation campaign. PayPal shows 10,765 euros and 6,500 euros were donated by bank transfer. The top donation is 3,000 euros and leads currently in the race for the signed war and tactic flag, which I will give to the highest single donation. All of you, no matter how much you contribute, are of course doing something powerful as always, and are making more of a difference than many other people do in their entire lives. As always, you can find all the information about this at the top of the video description. Let's start again with today's drone strikes. On one hand, the thermal power plant in Belgorod was hit. On the other hand, deep strike units of the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces, in cooperation with the Unmanned Systems Forces, attacked the Astrakhan gas processing plant. The plant processes natural gas, gas concentrate, gasoline, diesel, and heating oil, which Ukrainian sources say are also used militarily. Russia is expanding a launch site for drones of this type in the Bryansk region, about 70 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Shahed. Satellite images show 3 fixed launch devices for Shahed and Drbera drones, as well as a separately constructed road specifically intended for launches from mobile carrier vehicles. Using both fixed launch pads and mobile launch axes suggests a mixed deployment strategy. Fixed launchers enable frequent launches and standardized procedures, while mobile platforms are harder to detect, harder to counter, and allow flexible deployment. The location of the site allows launches to take place outside the range of many Ukrainian short-range systems, while also shortening the flight time to northern and central areas of Ukraine and reducing the reaction time of Ukrainian air defenses. While Pokrovsk, Siversk, and Kupiansk have been the scenes of recent weeks, and in some cases still are, Kostiantynivka is coming under increasing pressure. The city has a personal connection for me. You know, besides everything else, I'm also a volunteer firefighter, and at the beginning of the war, I thought that maybe I could do a bit more. Through a few local kids, a fire department was suggested to me that has its base here in Kostiantynivka. I've donated to them a couple of times, and one of the viewers of War and Tactic even donated several compressed air breathing apparatuses, which he was able to get from a fire department because they were no longer needed. Those went there as well, and I'm also in pretty good contact with them and see that they're in action every day, even under terrible conditions. Not only is the fire hot and equipment scarce, but missions are also performed under constant threat from drugs or artillery. You can see that besides their heavy gear, they must also wear protective vests and helmets. And this very city is still being fought over. The Russians are attacking here from the east across a huge gray zone, which is shown in yellow here. That means for us as viewers, or for me as an analyst, that there are hardly any fixed positions here. Ukrainian positions are scattered here, mostly foxholes, just like on the Russian side. They're often just a few hundred meters apart and may not realize another position is nearby. And to me, it really seems like the Russians are trying to bypass positions here again with sabotage teams or infiltration squads. This terrain is especially interesting since it's not flatland, as we'll see soon on the topographic map. This is actually quite a hilly area with many valleys in the middle, especially where the water collects. There are very few geolocations in the yellow area on either side. There are only isolated attacks by small squads trying to bypass positions in the gray zone, capture them, or report them for the following forces. On the topographic map, you can see the 2 attack routes even better. One route goes over the hill from Chasiv Yar, which brings them quite close to the city and also has a fortified road, and the other route goes through the valley in the southeast of the city. Today, Russian forces were located here at the Blue Pin as they tried to capture a trench system. The Ukrainians repelled the attack with drones, but Russians are already active in that area. They appear to be exploiting weaknesses in the Ukrainian defenses again. to gather near the city and then secure territorial gains that they can hold on to, until subsequent units manage to take over these positions and can then continue fighting through the area. As I said, if there were Russian geolocations, then they were all here in this neighborhood. And we can also take another look at the map on Google Maps because it's still pretty up to date. Specifically, it's this spot right here. That's where the Russians were spotted today, and that's the trench system that was just fought over. What's quite interesting, of course, is that there were also some geolocations here, scattered in this neighborhood, which means that Russian soldiers were probably already able to break through or penetrate at another point, probably from down here. If there were no new trenches, I can see the Russians connecting here at some point, because it's quite well defended here. I can quickly spot 3 Ukrainian positions here, but little else. That's in a spot that's hard to see, while this flank was better protected up here. Here we again see Ukraine's old trench systems, a vast interconnected network. It's always very dangerous. Why? I've explained many times already. To sum it up briefly, if the Russians manage to break in somewhere here, then the Ukrainians can no longer isolate them. And theoretically, the Russians have the possibility to keep advancing, protected by the trench, and push the Ukrainians out of here again to take over the system themselves. Whereas there are many isolated trench systems that are a bit farther apart and would also cover each other. Then you could isolate the Russians there and target them with fire, while the other systems would remain safe from capture. But as I said, this is still from earlier times, so about a year ago, because the Ukrainians have only recently started to modify their systems differently. But let's stay with drones for a moment, and this time, let's take a look at underwater drones. The Ukrainian Security Service, SPU, released a video at Novorossiysk port. Here, they report the world's first confirmed combat use of underwater kamikaze drones. You're all familiar with the Ukrainian drone type Sea Baby, and now they have a new version. This is basically the Sub-Sea Baby, the underwater Sea Baby, which was used here. According to Ukrainian sources, the drones hit a Russian submarine, the Project 636-3, known by NATO as the Kilo class. A similar one was already destroyed in an airstrike before, and that was the first submarine the Russians lost here. The explosion caused severe damage, disabling the submarine. The affected submarine was equipped with 4 launchers for Kaliber cruise missiles, which Russia regularly uses for attacks on Ukrainian territory. The 13th conducted the operation together. Main Directorate of Military Counterintelligence of the SPU and the Ukrainian Navy. This class of submarine is valued at about $400 million. Under the current sanctions conditions, I would estimate a new build at about $500 million. The Kilo class is considered quite difficult to detect due to its low acoustic signature, and is therefore also referred to as the black hole. You know what? But what's even more frightening is that the Ukrainians, as you can see, have access to the surveillance cameras of a military port. You have to consider how long they've already been there, able to track which ships are in the port, when and for how long, and what goods, weapons, or units are present on site. And if they can already see everything here, I wonder what other cameras they have access to in Russia. To me, that's an even bigger insult than the damaged submarine, much like in 2023, when Ukrainian hackers breached a Russian cybersecurity conference online. They then played their national anthem over the conversation and muted the Russian speakers. As I've said many times before, in my opinion, the Ukrainians have extremely good intelligence services, which work excellently under Muranov. High-level talks on Ukraine policy are underway in Berlin. Zelensky and his delegation have arrived, along with several European leaders and a United States delegation, led by Special Envoy Wittkopf. The main goal of the talks in Berlin is to formulate a common position between Ukraine, the key European countries, and the United States, so that they can approach Moscow with a united front. The goal is to prevent Washington and Russia from negotiating Europe's security and Ukraine's vital interests bilaterally. Why is the meeting happening? The United States currently drives negotiations, while key issues remain unresolved. Territorial control, security guarantees, the future of Ukraine's alliance status, and the question of which levers the West is actually willing to use, The Europeans want to ensure that a possible ceasefire does not just lead to a short-term freezing of the front, which Russia could use to resume its offensive later. Instead, reliable deterrence and security mechanisms for Ukraine are established. This shows our chancellor's clear closeness to Zelensky, who sits at the center of the Ukrainian delegation instead of between both sides, because they want to send a signal of unity. Ukraine is not an object, but a subject of the negotiations. It's unfortunate the United States is sitting across the table, like in negotiations, instead of having productive meetings as true allies. The best result would be a European and United States stance that lets us stand up to Putin and also engage with him, so that together we can put pressure on him so he can finally consider a ceasefire and peace. According to the broadcaster, Telewizja Polska World, Poland is considering handing over up to 8 older MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine as part of a possible military technical exchange deal. The aircraft are currently located in western Poland, but are considered outdated and could be replaced by Western systems. Such a transfer would have mainly short-term operational benefits for Ukraine, since the MiG-29 is already integrated into the Ukrainian Air Force, and therefore, no retraining or adaptation phases are needed to deploy them. On the other hand, it is not as modern as one of the current Western counterparts. Special thanks to the Alja Crew Konami members, especially Colonel Dreneka, Robert Ziller, and Dietrich. Thanks again for listening. Subscribe, comment, and see you at the next report.